data. So I have South County, Central, and North County. So I can basically go for custom sort, and then I can choose which is the value or column which I'm interested in. Let's go for area. We will go for something like cell values. Well, you can also try to explore conditional formatting icon if this is what you would want to use, or we can basically go for just cell values. And here we can say if I would be interested in first getting my values for South County. So for example, I can say custom list, and then I can basically give in the new list here. So I can say S dot county, and then I would want Central, and then I would want North County. So let's select this as it exists. We can basically say add, and that's basically the order which we want. Say OK, and then say OK here. And now what we would want is we would want our data, so we can compare that with the values which we see here. It starts with Kelly. You have in the 12th row something like Lang, and that's what we are doing. So we can basically arrange the data in a particular order by choosing a custom list and then sorting your data. So that's one more simpler task what we have done, where we have sorted the data in the order where under our area column, we first wanted South County, then we wanted Central data, and then we wanted North County. So this is how you can do it. Now, let's look into one more problem. So it says find all the houses in the central area, and we would want to basically apply a regular filter. Let's see how do we do that. So we can click on this, and here we have the data. So the problem statement is we would want to find all the houses in central area. Now how do we do that? We can do a sorting, but we would want to use the filter which you see here is implemented. So how do you do it? So you can select this area, and say for example I would want to apply filter. I can just go in here and I can say let's get a filter on my first row, and now I have filters applied. So we are interested in looking into the central area houses. Let's go in here. It says all these fields are selected. That means it shows everything wherein your area has all these values. Let's unselect this, and then I will only be interested in the central. So let's say OK, and then say OK. So now you see the area filter has been applied, and we are looking at the central column. So what we have done is we have applied a simple filter, and we are looking at our data. At any point of time, if you do not want the filter, then what I can do is I can select this, and I can say, well, I'm interested in all the data. So I could do this, or you can clear the filters from area and you get your data back. So that's in one way you can filter out your data. So let's look at an example of sort and filter, where we might have to filter the data based on two columns or multiple columns with different kind of values, where it could be and or condition. Now say for example this is the data I have, and this is the question which we need to answer, such as find the list of all houses in the central region with pool and South County without pool. Now, if it was a simple filter based on one cell, I could have just selected my header row. I could have then applied the filter. And once I have the filter, I can look in area where I have three regions. So I'm only interested in Central and South County. So I can get rid of North County, and that's fine. But then we have two different conditions here. So we need the data in Central region to have the value for pool being true, and for South County the value has to be without pool. Now how do we do that? So what we can do is we can first create a copy of these headers here, So let me do that. Now the area has to be South County. So basically I can either just select this and I can choose this value, and then I can select this and then I can choose central. So that's the criteria which I have, and the pool value has to be, so central region should be with pool. So then this one basically has to be true, and this one has to be basically false. So South County is without pool. So let's select one of the values here, and this is my criteria. Now to get my result, we can always place your cursor here and you can check this is M column and 8th row. Okay, so we would want the result here. So let's go ahead and now click on data, and then in filter you have an option called advanced, and here what I can do is I can say I would want to filter the list in the place, but that's not what I would want to do. So I'll say copy to another location, and here if you see the list range will tell me that this is the data. So A1 to J126, so A to J column selected and all the rows. Criteria range is basically based on what I've given here. So that is M from 1 to V, which is 3. So I'm selecting these columns and then I'm saying all the way whatever criteria I've given, and copy to, I'm saying M8 to V8. So that basically will give me my filtered result. So you could basically just say okay, and now I have my data which has been filtered, and I have my area which is South County, that is without pool, central with pool, again South County without pool, and then if you look at your central value, that's pool. So this is an advanced filter which we have applied, where simply we have filtered the data based on 2 columns and then we have our result. So in this way you can have your customized filter applied on 2 different columns and get your data, which can be either replacing the existing content, or in the same sheet in different set of columns and rows you can have your result. Let's look at one more example of filtering where you are trying to filter the data based on an AND condition being met in 2 different columns, and then you would want to filter out the data for only specific columns. So the situation is the agents with a house in North County, that should be county, area having 2 and a single type family. So we are talking about 2 bedrooms, and we would basically have a single type family, and here the criteria is that we would want to only populate these columns, which is agent, area, bedroom and type. Now what you can do is, as I explained earlier, that you can get your result in the same sheet in a different location. So here I have created these headers which says agent, area, bedrooms and type. Now this is basically a copy of all the columns what we have here: agent, data listed, area, list price, bedrooms, bath, square feet and so on. So you can basically create a copy of the headers here, and this is where we will give our advanced criteria to filter the data. So the conditions which need to be met is we need to look at North County. So for example, here in area, I can basically go ahead and select one of the values, North County. Now the criteria is having 2 bedrooms only. So let's say bedrooms, and let's say the value should be 2. And then basically I'm saying a single type family. So when you would want the single type family, so here under type, I can give the criteria single type. So this is my AND condition. So we are saying North County area having 2 bedrooms and the type is single family. Now this is the criteria, which basically means if I select this one tells me that this is M1 row onwards till V2. So this is what we have. and we would want to filter based on this. So let's go ahead and then go for data, filter, advanced. And here in advanced, it says filter the list in place. Now that's not what we would want to do. So I'll say copy to another location. This basically selects the list range. So which is telling me A1 to J126. So that's the columns and rows selected. Criteria range is based on M1, V2, which we have given here. And copy to, I would say, for example, from M7 to P7. Now this is the area where this is the place where I want the result. Let's say OK. And now I get my data, which is based on the question which has been asked, that you would want the agents with a house in North County area having 2 bedrooms and single type family. So in this way, you can basically do advanced filtering, get your data and get it stored in the sheet anywhere at a different location. Well, I could have also done filtering in place, and that would have replaced the data which we have, but that's not what we want. We would want the filtered result in a different place. So this is how you can do some advanced filtering. We can also use Excel to filter out the data in one particular column, which might be conditional or say using some numerical filters. Now here, say for example, the problem statement is that you would want to display all the houses whose list price is between 45,000 to 600,000. Or say for example, we would want to filter out the data to something else. Say for example, let's say I would want to filter out the data between 300,000 and 400,000. So we can basically update this. Say for example, I'm saying I'm interested in 300,000 to 400,000, and that's the criteria to filter out the data. Now there are two different ways, or there are two easier ways to do it. One is I would want to look at the list price. So I can select this. I can go ahead and do a filter here, and in the list price, now this is where we would want to do the filtering. So it's pretty easy. You can click on this one and then you can go into number filters and you can choose between. Now that's one easier way of doing it. So I could basically select this. I could say I'm looking for value which is greater than or equal to 300,000 and then is less than or equal to 400,000. So if I just do this, I have applied my filter and I have my data which is filtered based on my criteria, right? So that's one easier way of doing it. Or let me do a Control Z. Now let the filter be there, which you can anyways use. But what we can also do is, as we have seen earlier methods, so get a set or get your column headers here, and then you are giving two columns here. Now the only difference between this set of columns, which I have 1 2 3 4, and then you have 7 and 10 columns, and if you see here we have 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11, right? So whenever you want a AND condition, you will basically add the columns where I can give add condition if it is the same column. If it was a different column, then it would be same number of columns, but AND conditions will lie in the same line and OR condition would lie in a different line. Now here I can give this value, so I am looking for listed price being between 300,000, so I am saying it should be greater than or equal to 300,000, and then I can say less than or equal to 400,000. Now that's my criteria, and then I need my result here, which is in M7. So what I can do is, once I've given my criteria which I'll be using to filter, I can get into data, I can get into advanced, and then I can say copy to another location. So it is selecting my A1 to J126. Criteria range is based on M1 to W2. And then I would want my result from this particular column. So let's say OK. And now you have your data filtered out in a different location in the sheet, which has been filtered based on your AND condition. So you can filter out the data in this way, or you could just apply a filter on a column and give the conditions. Now let's solve one more interesting problem. And here we would want to use Excel, where we would have an and, an or condition. So say for example, this is the data given to you, and the question is that you would want to find all the houses in North County. Again, that's a spelling mistake, but then they are North County area with a list price greater than 300,000 and having 3 or 4 bedrooms. So the bedroom has conditional, so it has or 3 and 4, and then basically you have list price which is greater than 300,000. Now I could have obviously selected the columns and then basically gone for a filter. So I can just do a filtering here, and then I'm looking for list price being greater than 300,000, so which we can always give a number filter, and I can say greater than, and then I can say greater than or equal. So I can say greater than, and then I can give 3,000, 30, 300,000, and that's basically the filter which we would want. And here I would want to select the bedrooms, which should be just either 3 or 4. So if for example here I go in here and I unselect this and then I say 3 and 4, right? So I am getting my data which is greater than 300,000, and it should have the bedroom values which will be either 3 or 4 selected. Now that's one way of doing it. Let's do a Control Z and get it back to as we were, or you can even just say clear filter, so you get your data back as it was. So what we can do is we can here give the criteria. So for example, I have my list price. Now this is what I would want as a condition. So let's say greater than 300,000, and bedrooms should be 3. And then I can say greater than 300,000, and then I can say 4. So this one basically gives me a situation where your list price has to be greater than 300,000 and bedroom should be either 3 or 4. So we have given our filtering criteria. Now to get the result, what we can do is we can go into data, we can go into advanced, and we can say copy to another location. So our list range is selected, which is columns A to J, row number 1 to 126. Your criteria range is given in M1 to V3, where we have specified, and we are saying the result would be in M7 to V7. So if I do this, now I have got the same data which we were seeing earlier, and here the bedroom values are 3 or 4, and basically the list price is greater than 300,000. So this is a simpler way in which you can create your filters. And all this advanced filtering, what we are seeing, it will be saved with your sheet. You can always go back and change this value, or you could do filtering where one person has to look into the filter to see what values have been selected. Now that we have looked into some operations which we can perform in Excel using filter or sorting the data, creating your tables, let's also quickly look at functions and formulas which can be used for doing some easy calculations or computations. Now, Excel can be used in different kind of data analysis. So for example, you have different inbuilt functions which can be used, and we can always check for a particular function. So for example, if I wanted to look at a particular function, I could just type in here something, for example is, and then it shows me all the possible functions. And you can always have a look at the detail of the function. For example, you have is even, which will return true if the number is even. If we would say is logical, so I could search for is logical, and that tells me whether a value is logical value, true or false, and returns your value true and false. Now we can obviously say subtotal, so you can search for any of these useful functions, and that tells me what this function can be used for. So returns a subtotal in a list or a database. You have many other such functions such as integer, sum, average. You may be interested in working on truncating some data, getting the absolute value, getting the square root, basically getting a count or getting a max value. You can look for any particular functions within your Excel sheet. Now you also have other functions such as now or time. For example, let's look at now function. So I can search for now, and here it is. So this is returns the current date and time formatted as a date and time. So this is the function which we would want to use. And if I just give the function, it tells me what is the current time. Let's first look at the description of time here. So say for example, I would want time. It says converts hours, minutes and seconds given as numbers to an Excel serial number formatted with a time format. So for example, if I would say 2 hours and then 30 minutes and 30 seconds, and if I do this, it has basically converted this into your time format. So you can always use different inbuilt functions for your work. Now we will also look at some advanced functions like SUMIF or SUMIFs. You have COUNTIF and COUNTIFs, and you can be working on various functionalities of Excel to easily help you in doing some calculations, computations, working with your data, working with your different cell values. So let's look at some example of using functions like sum or SUMIF. So for that, let's go to this sheet, and here we have some data. Now I have already applied a filter which can allow me to filter out the data. So it says find the total units that were sold in the East region. Now we know that in region we have East, and I have multiple regions. I could basically be saying unselect all and select only East and say OK, and that basically gives me the units which were sold. And if I placed my cursor here, and then if I did a auto sum, so it would basically give me the function which is being used, so something like subtotal, and it is basically working on your rows, which is E2 to E44. And here we can just do this, so that gives me the total. But this is fine, you could do that, but it would be good if we know how do we use a function like SUMIF to do that. So here I'm seeing this is the subtotal where I'm looking at the values, and basically what I have done is I have filtered out the region, and then basically I'm getting a count. But this does not give me clearly how a sum was calculated from all the values which were listed. What we can also do is let's do a Control Z and let's get it back. So now we have our data, and we would want to get the total units that were sold in the East region. So what I can do is I can start typing in my formula, and for that I'll use an inbuilt function. So for example, I would be interested in going for SUMIF. Now it says SUMIF adds the cells specified by a given condition or criteria. When you talk about SUMIFs, this is when you could give set of conditions or multiple criteria. So let's look at SUMIF. Let's do this. Now obviously this gives me an error because the formula is not right. So we have to basically come in here and let's start with sum if. Now when I say sum if, it shows me there is a function with sum if which we would want to use, and here once I open up the bracket, it tells me, okay, what is the range of data which you are interested in. So I'm interested in all the units that were sold in the East region. So we are interested in the region which is here. So I can basically be selecting this, and this tells me you are interested in the data here. So let's not take the header value. So let's say B2, and then we can go all the way to the end. So we can basically select this way. That's the data we have. Select this and hit enter. So now here it has selected B2 to B4, but we need to basically now give the criteria. So the criteria is either a value or you can point it to a cell which has that particular value. So as per our problem statement, we are looking for the units which are sold in East region. So I can select the value East here, and then my sum if needs the range on which you want to calculate a sum. So let's select this, and now we are interested in finding out the sum of units. So that's basically this column, E column. So I can basically type in instead of selecting. So I can say E, and I'm interested in E2 to E44. So that basically selects the area or all the values. And now let's do this. So that basically gives me the sum is 691. Right now, this is the criteria where I have pointed it to a cell, and whatever value that cell has, well, I could have done something like this. So I could have selected East, giving the value, and then doing it. It still does the same thing, and in this way you have more clarity that you are using sum if. You are filtering the data, so you have given the rows, you are given the criteria, and then you have given the range on which you would want to sum up the values. Now similarly, if the question was what was the total revenue generated from binder, now we would want to find out what is the total revenue generated from binders. That means my filtering criteria will be binder, and then I want to find out the total revenue generated. So we have the revenue generated field also here, and we don't have any region to be filtered. We are just looking for binder. So let's again start doing the same thing. So we can go for sum if, we can open the bracket. Now it needs the range, so we are interested in revenue generated. Now that's the summation we want, and we would want to get the range of data. So here we can basically select D2 to D44. So that's the data selected. Now I would want to give the filtering criteria. So let's say binder, and then we need to give the range on which the sum needs to be calculated. So that's my revenue column. So that's G. So I can say G2 to G44, and that basically selects the column, and then you get your sum. So it tells me what is the total revenue generated from binder. Now I could be doing this for other things also. So say for example, if you would want to filter out something else, you could basically just drag and drop here, and then I could come here and change this to, say, instead of binder, I would be interested in, say, pencil, if that's the criteria you are interested in. Remember to change this so that you take all the values, and here we will change it to select the relevant rows, and then this is the data I'm getting. So I know that this is the revenue generated from pencil. this is the revenue generated from binder. Now this is a simple use case where we are using some if. What if we would want to use some ifs? So some ifs, let's have a look at how we get to some ifs. So some ifs is where you would want to work on doing some calculation, but then you would want multiple criterias to be met. So let's see how we get this. So here what I can do is, let's work on this problem statement which says what is the total revenue generated from central region where the item is a pencil. So that's something which I would want to check. Now when we are answering this question, we can also look at the order in which things have been asked in the question. So it says what is the total revenue generated from central region. So we need the total revenue generated. We know there is a revenue column. We are interested in getting the total revenue generated. We are saying the filtering criteria is central region, and we say in that we would be interested only in the item if it is pencil. How do I do it? So I can use some ifs where you can pass in multiple criteria. So let's start with some ifs. And when I start with some ifs, let's open up the bracket. So it says sum range, it says criteria range, then it gives one criteria, and you can give in any number of criterias. So for example, we are interested in total revenue generated. Now that's my G column. So let's follow in the same order. So let's say G2. So that's my first value. And then I know there are 44 rows here. So I can say G44. And you can obviously check if that has selected all the rows. Now that's my total revenue generated. So I would want the total revenue generated. So I'm saying setting this sum range. Then I need to give the criteria range. So it says from central region. So central region comes into column 2, that's B. So let's say B2 to B44. So that's my criteria range. Then you have to give your criteria, but we need to filter out the region being central. So let's select this. Now either I could point to a value in the cell, or I can just give the exact value here. We can also give a wildcard or matching pattern, so that also works. Now this one is fine. We are now also interested in finding the total revenue generated when the region is central and the item is pencil. How do we do that? So for item, we know the column is D2. So let's select D2 to D44. So that basically selects all the rows in the D column, and we need to give the filtering criteria. So let's do a comma and then just give in our value. So let's say pencil, and then let's close your bracket, and that basically gives you the result. So we need to just follow the order of our question, which says what is the total revenue generated. So we are looking at the revenue column, we are selecting all the rows. Then it says from the central region. So we need to select the region column and give the filtering criteria as central, or point to a cell which contains that value. And then it says we would be interested only in item being pencil. So then you select the column which has all the items and provide your filtering criteria, that is pencil. So that's your easy calculation of using sum if, which we compare with sum if here. So sum if here was just having your criteria. So basically you are selecting your rows, giving your filtering criteria, and then your sum range. In sum ifs, we are giving multiple condition. Now same thing can be done here. It says how many units were sold by sales representative Jones where the cost of each item was greater than 4. So how many units were sold by sales representative. So when we talk about how many units, that's your E column. So let's start with that. So let's say some ifs. I would be interested in E column. And let's give the range. So it says some range. So those are the number of units on which we would want to find the sum. Then it says you need to give the criteria range. So we say sales representative, where the name is Jones. So sales representative is in sales rep column C. So let's say C2 to C44. Now then we need to give our filtering criteria. So let's say Jones is the sales representative where we are interested, about whom we are interested in. And then the question says where the cost of each item. So cost of each item is what we are interested in. You have unit cost. So that's what we are interested in. So that would be F, and then say F2 to F44. And then you need to give your cost. So it says where each item is greater than 4. So let's select this and let's do this. So this tells me 301. Now, similarly, let's answer our third question, which says how many units did Jones sell excluding pencil item? So we would want to find out what was the total number of units that were sold, and that units or that should not include the pencil item. How do we start doing this? So let's start with some ifs. Now we know that you start with some ifs, you need to give the sum range. So we are interested in the number of units. So let's basically go in and select our number of units which were sold. So that's your column E. So I can say E2 to E44. That's where I would want to perform the sum. Now I'm saying how many units that were sold, where we are talking about sales rep being Jones. So let's see, let's select the columns C and then give the range. After that, we need to give our filtering criteria, which is Jones, and then we are interested in the items, but excluding pencil. So items is in column D. So let's say D to D44, and then we have to give our criteria. So we can say, well, that should exclude pencil. So I can basically say pencil, and let's close this and let's check. So that's my formula, which says that these are the number of units which the sales representative, whose name is Jones, had sold, and that does not include pencil as an item. Let's also look at an example of using COUNTIF or COUNTIFs. Now, both of these can be very useful when you would want to calculate certain values. So for example, if I would want to work on COUNTIF, let's try solving this problem. Now, remember, you can answer these questions using filters, and that can be an easier way, but then sometimes you may want to get the formulas so that you can make your spreadsheet and your calculation more dynamic in nature, and that will basically depend on the values in the columns or rows. So for example, if I have find the total number of times Gil has made a sale. Now if I look at my data here, it tells me that for every sales representative there is some value in the sale, and it says sales has greater than 3. So for example, Jones, you have sales greater than 3, or you have Jardine, which is sales greater than 3, and so on. So what we are interested in is doing a quick count and finding out the total number of times Gil has made a sale. How do we do that? So we can use this countIf function, and if I go into countIf, it says counts the number of cells within a range that meet the given condition. Now what's our condition? Our condition is Gil, and we would want to find out how many times the name say Gil appears or Gil has made a sale. Now I could just say countIf and then open up a bracket. I need to give a range. So let's say we are interested in looking at the range. So let's say we will choose sales rep. So I can say C, and then I can say C2 to C44. Now that's my range. Let's not give that in quotes. So you have to give a range. So let's do a countIf that selects the data, and then we need to give the condition. So for example, let's here give the name, which is Gil, and then close this. So that basically tells me it is 5 times Gil appears here. We can check this. So I can go in here, I can add a filter, and then might be I would be interested in looking at only Gil, and that basically gives me 5, right? So we can always do that, and we can be using formulas like this. Now what about this question? So which basically says which sales representative made a sale more than 3 times. Now it might be looking little confusing when I say, for example, let me clear out this filter. Now we have sales greater than 3, and we would want to find out which sales representative made a sale more than 3 times. Now I could basically check for every sales representative here if they have made a sale more than 3 times, and what I can do is I can just say equals, I can start with countIf, then I need my filtering criteria. So that's your range. So first thing is we will choose, for example, let's choose C2 to C44, and then we need to give an criteria. What is the criteria? We need basically a sales representative. So I can choose the value here in C2, and then I can close this, and then I can say the sale has to be greater than 3, and let's check. So it tells me the Boolean value that yes, this guy has made sales more than 3 times. And what we can do is we can just drag and drop, which basically gives me the value for other sales rep. You can always check the value is automatically changing to this value in cell. And for example, let's go in here. So this is obviously 2, so it says me false, right? And you can basically get the values for all your values. So that basically tells me which sales representative has made a sale more than 3 times. Now, like some ifs, we also have count ifs where you can give multiple criterias. So for example, the question is how many orders were placed from the East region after this particular date. So we have a date criteria, we also have the region criteria, and we need to basically get the count of number of orders which were placed. Now I can in this case use count ifs, and this basically says that you can start with a criteria. So it says how many orders were placed from East region after particular date. So date is in my first column. So for example, I could say A, start with 2, and say for example, let's go A44. That should have selected all the rows, and then I need to, once I've given the criteria range, I need to give the criteria. So we are saying the date has to be greater than 10th Feb. So let's give it 2/10/2019, and then you need to say how many orders were placed. So you need to give the criteria, second criteria range. So we are looking at the number of orders which were placed from the East region. So when I would want to look at the region, that's your column B. So I can basically say B2 to B44. And here I would basically give my criteria. So the criteria is East. Let's give that. And once you have done this, you would want to find out the total number of orders. So let's select this. And if I do this, it tells me 13. Now, is that right? So we are looking for your date, your region being East, and then getting the total number of orders. So here I can just do a count if I'm saying A2 to A44, wherein I have given the date criteria that it should be greater than 10th Feb, because I do not want to count 10th Feb. It says after 10th February. And then you're saying the region has to be East. So we would want to find out the total number of orders. So my region is East, and that gives me the result. Now, similarly, you can also find out how many times Gill sold pencils. So here we will have to give the range. So let's start with count ifs. Now here I would want that item is pencils, so we can as well select column D to D44. Then you have to give your criteria, so that's your pencil. And then we are looking for sales rep, which is Gill, so that is my column C. So let's say C2 to C44, and the value should be just Gill. So it tells me it's twice where Gill has sold pencils. So we can obviously check this by going in here, choosing my filter, and then let's search for rep being just Gill. Okay, and now we are interested only in the item being pencil. So I can say, well, let's get to pencil only, and that tells me twice. So you can obviously re-verify using filters, but using functions or using formulas, it is always good to calculate, and that can be making your computation and calculation more dynamic. Let's look at one more interesting feature of Excel, and that's your conditional formatting. Now, as you see on the screen, conditional formatting has different rules which can be applied on your data, and that allows you to basically differentiate or easily identify data values which are based on certain criteria or rules. So when you talk about conditional formatting, you have different options, such as you can highlight cell rules, you can get top and bottom values, you can apply different rules, apply different color scales, and you can easily manage these rules. So conditional formatting is very useful for people who would want to work on huge amount of data and easily perform some data analysis. It's easy to use as it is shown here, and with your conditional formatting, you can format cells based on a preset condition. You can perform conditional formatting to identify cells. You can highlight a few significant cells, and you can easily perform conditional formatting as shown on the left side. Now, how do we work with conditional formatting? Let's have a quick look. So say, for example, we have our Excel sheet, and if you see here, I am highlighting the salesperson who have generated revenue greater than 10,000. So we can be looking at the values where the revenue generated by a particular sales person is greater than 10,000. It has a particular color. And how do we get here? So for example, let's select this data, and what I could do is I could go into conditional formatting. Now I could basically highlight cell rules, and we could just say greater than. That's an easier way. I could also go ahead and create a new rule, but then I can use one of this option. I can say greater than, and let's give some value. Might be we would be interested in looking at any value greater than 12,000. So let's choose 12,000. And here it says what color would you want to select. So for example,